Now that we have the line work done for this artwork, it's time to work out all the color fills I'm going to use within the context of this artwork. So let's get started. We have the nice inked out line work, and all I want to do is I want to start coloring. Now, like a good cooking show, I have some of this pre-baked because it's going to be monotonous doing it over and over and over again, but I will show you a few iterations of that so you get the idea of how I went about doing it. Super easy. So all I'm going to do is on this layer here, we want to create a new color hue. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to make sure I use HSB sliders here. And this is, you can also go up here and you can just pick a color value if you want. I know this one is going to be more of a red type color, so I'll just adjust this. Let's go and bring this over right about there, I think, and not so saturated. I'm going to drop this one down. Right about, I don't know, right about there or so. And maybe bump this one up, brightness just a little bit, like that, something like that. And so that's the color we have loaded. Again, we're using a vector brush to do all of our coloring, and that's just the round one. And again, if we go to settings, we have pressure dynamics. You can use velocity dynamics, and up here is a nice window where you can preview what you want. So I think that's going to work okay. And then the size of the nib, we're sticking with around 14, 15 here, and that is controlled in this area as well. So now all we have to do is we need to create another, we'll just go ahead and draw on the layer we have here. So what I like to do, because in Fresco, your swatches will be automatically created, but you can't really organize them or delete them for that matter. They'll just be replaced as the list grows. So what I like to do, if I'm doing any kind of color work in Fresco, is I'll just draw like my own, kind of like I do in Illustrator. Well, I'll just draw an area like this. And again, you can go to the bucket fill once you have kind of the fenced in area of the color in this case and just fill it. So that'll be the color I want to use. And I'm going to go ahead and create another layer. So we'll go ahead and add a layer here. And on this layer, I'm going to make sure to name it. And we'll name this one red, like that, and done. We can collapse that. And then on this layer is where I'll start coloring the different areas of this design with the red color. Now, when I'm doing a composition like this and it has a lot of different colors, I'm trying to balance color overall. And so what I might initially put down, I might go back later and erase and flip it with another color just to balance all the colors together. So I'll go in here. And if you think like a comic book, most comic books are colored in Photoshop, actually. And so the inker, you have a penciler who does the penciling. You have an inker who's a separate person usually, and they do the inking. Then you have a colorist. I have several friends who work in comic books, and one is a very gifted inker and one is a very gifted colorer. So we're kind of approaching the color in the same way on its own layer here, right here, and that's under the line work, which is at the top here. So we'll go ahead and color here. And again, I'm using a vector-based brush, and all I have to, oops, you can see I already screwed up. So let's go ahead and go back. And I might go a little smaller on this. We'll go 10 right here. And all I'm doing is I'm trying to keep it within this like that. So I'm overlapping that edge. And almost like I did the initial kind of swatch color is I'll just encircle it or fence it in, then I can use the bucket tool and just fill it like that. So that's all I'm going to do for all the different areas that are going to be red. maybe up here under the eye. Make sure you always go back to the brush tool, because if you don't, you'll just fill the entire layer with that color like that. Bucket, fill. So this is all I'm going to do, and I'll go ahead, maybe we add it over here on the shape around these eyes, this eye I mean, like that. And the bucket like that. So you don't want to watch me do this more than a couple times. So not hard, especially on this. It's more like a kind of like a coloring book. I think it's weird how it just kind of blurs out. I mean, it's vector. I guess they do that just to make it faster, I guess. I'm not sure. Because I don't see that in Procreate. Procreate doesn't do that, but it does it in Fresco. I don't really work in Procreate. I just have used it to create brush sets. It's always fun to create brush sets, even though I don't even really use Procreate myself. I prefer vector because I want the resolution independence, so I can take it and do an art print or a huge poster, and I'm not locked into a resolution that will prevent it from being used at larger levels, etc. Makes flexibility of usage a lot better. Like that. We'll go. I think what I'm going to do, just to speed up the process, is I'm going to mark areas that I think should be red just to balance. It needs something in the front here, so maybe this ring here. Go down here, something in the bottom, maybe that. Going back towards the back, maybe we do this one, this one. Get one of these dots, part of the scale. This, and in the tail, top and bottom, maybe one of these dots up here. Fill that in like that. I think that'll entail all the red. Let's go ahead and jump back to the brush here. Now, some of you might be watching me do this and go, well, why don't you just fill the inside shape of your line work? The reason why I don't do that is I know how this Fresco file is going to import into Illustrator, because when Fresco first came out, I tested it and did certain things like this in a more simplified way, and then moved it to the desktop and realized, oh, you don't want to do that. And it might not make sense to you now because you don't see it on the iPad, but when you bring it into Illustrator, you'll see why I did that. So it will make sense, and we will go over that at that point. So let's go ahead and just finish adding it. And in Illustrator on the iPad, they call it Illustrator on the iPad, but in my opinion, it's at best, it's Illustrator Lite. There's so many things it can't do. It does have a blob brush feature, but as I stated, I think in the previous movie, it's absolutely horrible, so I don't use it. I've tried it. I've compared it and actually record video comparing this inking process in Fresco using a vector brush like I'm doing now. I'm doing coloring, but same principle. And using the blob brush feature in Illustrator, and it like literally wigs out in the Illustrator app. It like flickers, and does not work good at all. And so I'm part of the beta team, so I posted those videos on the beta forum, and and everybody who tested it is going, well, that's interesting. I didn't notice that. And I don't know how they could not notice that. It's like just obvious. But that was what they said. So will they fix it? Will it ever get better? It should, hopefully. But then again, I've been telling them for 10 years to fix a bug in Illustrator regarding snapping, and they still haven't. So I won't hold my breath. I think the ironic thing about the AI team, their developers in general, is that zero, and I mean nobody on their team actually uses the software to create. So it's not like somebody tried the blob brush and go, oh, this works great. It's because nobody creates with it. So nobody was able to try the blob brush and say this works great. And how no beta tester noticed it when I picked up on it like within a few minutes, just going, what? This is horrible. It's like, but apparently it never got flagged. Nobody ever questioned it. And it gets released that way. And then they wonder why, they get blowback at times. So, oh well. It's my opinion that, Fresco is Adobe Illustrator's response to Creative Pro. But in my opinion, I don't think they're ever going to eclipse the user base on Procreate, that is. Because Procreate does such a great job of adding features that are things that just Adobe would never do. Even I was watching a video the other day, the 3D functionality they put in Procreate is just so intuitive and super easy to use. Whereas if you compare it to what they've added to Illustrator, Illustrator's kind of clunky. So I find that a bit odd. So that's how I would add that layer. We're gonna do one more, so bear with me here. We'll go ahead but first, let's go ahead and turn on this layer. And you can see I cheated and created other swatches because I'm not going to force you to watch me do this like 8 different times. I think 2 will suffice. So we'll go ahead and add another color. So I'll go back here, and I want this to be more of a teal. So I'll kind of get a general color by selecting it in the color wheel up here, and then I'll dial it in. I think the hue's a little off. Something like that. Oops. Go back in. I want saturation all the way to 100. And brightness, it's pretty close. Let's go up just a little bit. Maybe something like that. That's good. Let's go back to the vector brush. I'm going to create a new layer, and we'll name this one Teal. Close it. And now this is where I'll again balance where I want this teal to show up. So I think we'll put one there. We need to get something down the fin. Put one there. So when I look at all the colors together, I don't want any grouping a color to be overdone in any one area. I want it to kind of evenly distribute itself across the whole composition. Maybe those areas under his eye right there. We'll do this little guy up here. triangle that up at the top of the fin here. We'll go in here and fill this dot. See if there's any other areas. I think here, we'll do that up there. Back fin, maybe that guy. We'll do that dot there. Bottom. I think they'll probably do it. Maybe on this scale. That's good. I don't know if you guys can hear the yard maintenance people, their leaf blower. If so, I apologize. That's what you get when I record. Even in my there you go. See, I screwed up. I wasn't paying attention. Add the bucket tool. So undo it. Make sure to go to vector brush. When I record at home, even though I'm in a soundproof booth, it's not completely soundproof, especially when 5 feet away outside the window, the lawn maintenance people are blowing the leaf blower. So if you hear that, I apologize. Like that. We'll go ahead and fill this. So if it gets too loud, I just might not comment and just kind of edit the sound after the fact. We'll see. And I should point out, if they had like the blob brush inside of Fresco, or every time I touch the screen. So this is one iteration that I touch the screen. Now, if I go in and I ink continually here, and let's say I go like this, that will be a separate shape. Even though it looks like it fuses with everything, it doesn't. And that's what I'll show you when we move everything to Illustrator, and that's why I don't fill the line work, the black line work, that is. I'm actually coloring behind it on its own layer. And I think if they added that, and it doesn't need to do it by default, but it would be nice if you could select a layer after you've inked everything on it, like I'm doing here with Teal, and you could just say fuse or whatever they wanted to call it. That's pretty much all that's needed to improve the workflow, but unfortunately, they don't have that. I think they just added vector brushes to Fresco just so they could say they added it. I think it's primarily a raster-based program, or its strength there is a raster-based program, even though you do have this capability of using vector brushes. It's considered a hybrid app, but in my opinion, it's not on the same par as like Affinity Designer, which allows you to use the equivalent of what would be a Photoshop brush in a vector environment. Now, if they change the desktop to allow for that, that would be awesome. I would use more Photoshop brushes for that because, frankly, they're just more robust than a vector brush can be, because a vector brush, especially a scatter brush, can kind of get bloated pretty quick. And I'm working on a course for People Love. I developed a full course for LinkedIn Learning that will be out soon on creating vector brushes, but I'm going to adapt some of the methodology into a smaller course for People Love that will cover a lot of the same content, but obviously not put it behind a paywall so anybody can watch it. And that'll be a fun one because it'll show you how to create any type of brush and then how you can take those brushes and put it to use. And we'll do some artwork that utilizes all the various brush types. And they're a lot of fun. Once you create a brush and you see what you can do with it, you'll want to create more. So it is kind of a fun process. So we're going to go ahead and finish filling in all these areas. Like this. But oops. So if you go over an area like that, you can go undo, or in this case, I'll just fill it, and I'll go grab the eraser tool, and that has its own size. You can see it's smaller here. And I'll just erase over that area so it doesn't bump out. So you don't have to be perfect if you mess up as you're inking like this. By the way, my iPad Pro is a Generation 3, so I want to say it's like, well, I think it's 4 years old now, so it's not like a brand new one. So you don't need a brand new one to do everything I'm showing you here. Like that. We have a few more to go. This is why I don't want to spend too much time showing you all the colors, because I really don't need to. It's the same methodology. It's just applying different colors to different shapes. Like that. But you can see even the line work when I zoom in on it. I'll point it out in just a second. You get this little area that's up here, right there, the little sliver within the black area. Those are things I'll fix up when I move to Illustrator on the desktop. Because unless you zoom in a lot, you won't see some of those artifacts that you might create as you're inking like this. I finally figured out I want to do another psychomosaic portrait, and I think I'm going to do one of Einstein. I think that'd be fun. Years ago, I read not an autobiography, the same guy that wrote the biography on Steve Jobs, which I can't remember the author's name. Really good. A lot of good stories about development of the iPhone and the iPad. He's a really good author on doing biographies. Well, he did a biography I read years ago on Einstein. And one interesting story that was interesting is Einstein had already been doing his thought experiments for relativity when he worked for the post office in Europe, in Poland, maybe? I can't remember the country he was living in at the time. But he knew, he just knew he was going to win the Nobel Prize at some point. By the way, I think we're done with this. I'm just looking at it to make sure I don't want to add anything else. I think we have all the color added we need to add. I think that looks good. Anyway, getting back to my rabbit my rabbit trail here. Him and his first wife weren't doing so hot. So he wanted a divorce, but he knew his wife wouldn't give it to him. So he went to his wife and said, look, I'm going to win the Nobel Peace Prize if you grant me a divorce, I'll give you my prize winning. Now, keep in mind, at the time, the amount of prize was like $250,000. In his time was like millions in our time. It was a lot of money. And she agreed. And so once he did win, I think he won 4 years after that, or 4 years after that, he won. And he gave the prize money to her. She turned around and bought an apartment complex and then rented him an apartment, which I thought was a bit odd. So nothing to do with what we're covering here. I just thought that was an interesting story. So I'm going to turn on all the other layered colors. So here's green, here's yellow. And by the way, on all these, like on the purple one, you can see I named the layer. So make sure you get in the habit of doing that, because as we move to Illustrator, it will take all those names and save it out in a layered format, which will make cleaning it up a lot easier as we move forward. So all of these different colors, we'll turn on this last one here. And this is the one that's a little different than all the other colors, is that, oh, I just realized I forgot a few areas. Let's go back to the teal. I was going to add that up here and I forgot. Like this. If you organize your layers, it's going to make utilizing the artwork a whole lot easier. We'll add teal in here as well. Oops, I goofed up. I don't want to do that, so let's undo it. Go back to the brush, because that filled the whole layer with the teal. We don't want that. We just want these shapes like that. Then we can fill it. Go back to the brush. And I think that's everything. Oh, you know what? Let's go to the red. And by the way, if you want to sample a color you've already done, now I have this over here, so I can just click on this red to load that color. Or if you click on your eyedropper, you can sample any of the colors in the artwork, regardless if you're on that color layer or not. So we can sample the red that way. Just make sure you're on the right layer when you draw it, and we'll go ahead and add red here. Like that. And we'll color this one in manually and then fill that one in. So now we have all of our base color like that. I think that looks good. And some of you might still be wondering why I didn't just use the fill bucket tool. And what I mean by that, if I go to the outline layer here, and let's see, we'll turn off pink, or I'll hide pink. Let's say we wanted pink. So if I go here and sample the pink to load the pink color, if I'm on this outline layer, I could just grab the paint bucket and just click within the space. Let's do the fish lip here, and it would fill it into that space. But it's now embedded with the black and white. And as we move to Illustrator, by the way, this won't be this way as we move to Illustrator because I don't want to fill it that way. You'll understand why I didn't do that. It'll make sense. You'll see why exactly I didn't do that. It's going to make for cleaner art and allow us to clean up the vector art once we do move to Illustrator. But in the upcoming movie, that'll make complete sense as I show you all of that, because Fresco, unfortunately, creates some pretty sloppy vector art as we move into Illustrator. I'll show you why that is, and I'll show you how to improve it and how to clean it up and utilize it. In the next movie, we're going to add some shading and highlights to really push this artwork over the top. And again, if you have any questions about what I documented in this specific movie, please leave a comment or ask a question, and I'll be happy to answer it.